Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today I'm running a new type of format that I'm going to be using. I'm going to just be experimenting with for a little while. This is going to be the preview section of the video. Then I'm going to have a longer breakdown in a separate video. So today I wanted to discuss just 4 cases of racism that show there's nothing subtle about Brazilian acts of racism. Now, the reason I feel like I have to do that is because for years, this has been the MO of Brazil. Well, okay, if they don't flat out deny racism, then they'll say, okay, the racism in Brazil is just subtle. It's not blatant in your face like it is in places like the United States. And after, looking at Brazil for 23 years, I come to conclude, and I concluded this a long time ago, I don't see anything subtle. Of course, there are those subtleties, those gestures, those little jokes, those little off the cuff type of comments that people make. Yeah, though that exists too. But that does not negate the existence of blatant, just over the top type of racist incidents that people would not expect happen in Brazil. Again, I'll say there are over 3,700, almost 3,800 articles over at the blackbraziltoday.com blog where you can just see examples of this. I'm going to highlight a few of them today. There are stories today that there's so many topics and subjects and incidents to cover in Brazil from a perspective of race that just one blog or one video channel is not possible to cover everything. It's just not possible. And sometimes stories come and go. I don't get a chance to cover them. And sometimes I'll do like today where I'll just backtrack and go pull forward, bring to the forefront a story that maybe I wasn't able to cover in the last few years. So before I get into this today, I'm presenting just the facts of like 4 different stories. And then in a separate, more long form video, I'm going to break down my analysis and my reaction to these stories. So today, 4 cases that show there's nothing subtle about Brazilian acts of racism. Before I even get into it, make sure that you like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell so that you know when I put up a new video. And with that said, I'm going to move directly into this. So these are 4 different incidents. In this video, I'm going to talk mainly about the incidents, and in the longer form video, I'm going to get into my reaction and my analysis. Okay, some of the topics that I want to cover in terms of these 4 acts, and then the other stories that I'm going to tie in. These are some of the topics that I want to confront or discuss. Racism in Brazil versus United States, what they call blatant versus subtle. And I'm going to show that racism in Brazil can be just as blatant as anywhere else in the world. Okay. As I said, based on the idea that the myth that Brazil is a racial democracy, people wouldn't believe that these type of things happen in Brazil all the time. Just one blog, YouTube channel can't cover the incidents that happen every day. And because of social networks and social media these days, people are putting this out, in the public, and social networks are picking up on mainstream media is picking up on these stories that social networks share, and they become top news stories. And it's just, these things happen thousands of times every year. The second thing I wanted to discuss is the idea of segregation by law versus social segregation. The idea that in the United States, you had Jim Crow laws. In South Africa, you had apartheid. And people say, well, people who have talked about segregation in Brazil have talked about how you didn't find it in the law, but you find it socially acceptable. Black people don't walk on this side of the street. I'm not talking about necessarily now, but people like Abdias do Nascimento, who I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm going to feature one of his lectures. He talked about, certain days, certain areas that Black people weren't allowed to be walking in certain districts in certain cities. Okay. You have people who talk about they would have soccer matches where, okay, Black people aren't allowed on this team. You have to go play on that team. A woman that I knew in Sao Paulo who came from this city called Três Rios in the state of Rio de Janeiro, she remembers being in Sao Paulo in the 50s and 60s when she moved, that Black people initially were not allowed to frequent movie theaters in Sao Paulo. So you find a whole lot of these stories in Brazil's past that kind of unmask the reality about how race functions in Brazil. Um, you'll often hear, and I've heard this for 2 decades, when the idea is racism, it's always something that just happens in the US because you guys had the KKK. But I'm going to argue that when you compare the numbers, let's say the Ku Klux Klan at its height in the United States, how many people they killed, how many people they murdered, how many people they lynched, and then you compare it with the statistics of Brazil's military police and the fact that the vast majority of people that they kill in Brazil are Black or brown people, there's really no comparison. I'm going to get into that statistic later on, or probably in the longer form video. Races in Brazil are more blatant because they have no fear of legal actions. This is something that I've noticed in recent years. Like, Brazilians will do something that's extremely racist. They'll attack somebody, assault somebody, you know, insult someone, and be like, sue me, or whatever. I got money, I'll pay the fine, and I'll be fine. And this has happened over and over again. It's like, it's the perfect crime. Then as I go on, you're going to also see the picture of somebody who was called out for something that he did to, like, a homeless Black man, a homeless Black musician. I just have to look at him, because the question is always, what's the difference between a mixed person and a white person, a mixed person and a Black person? Because if we acknowledge that 90% of the Brazilian population is mixed to some degree, then to me that says that, okay, you have people who are mixed, but they appear whiter. You have people who are mixed that appear a little bit more on the Black side. It's always a question of what category does this person belong in based on what they look like. So let's get into the story for today. As I said, this is the preview video. I've talked a lot about this man, Abdias do Nascimento. He was really the first Black Brazilian to introduce me to how race works in Brazil. He was the only Black Brazilian author who I could find when I first started studying this topic in late 99, early 2000. You had a couple of books that he had released in like the 80s, late 70s and early 80s, and they were the only books I could find by a Black author in English, Black Brazilian author in English. So what I want to talk about first is this lecture that he did on the Black Consciousness Day in November 20th of 1983. So I'm going to overdub his lecture, okay? They say there's no racism here because here you don't set fire to Black people with gasoline or hang Black people by their throats on public sidewalks. That's the notion of racism that this ruling class wants to push on us. But there's more to racism than that. This is even a secondary face of racism. The racism that really destroys the vitality of a people. The racism that really usurps the rights of a people. It's the one that operates in Brazil. It's masked racism. It's this subtle racism. It's this racism that doesn't give the victim the right to self-defense. But we're not about to be fooled by false slogans of racial democracy anymore. And that's why we're here in Praça da República, emphasizing our visibility in this square that's ours, like the Condor jungle. We want to say that we repudiate this subtle racism, this masked racism. So as you can see, as you heard in his speech from 1983, the idea that subtle racism happens in Brazil. This is the way racism works in Brazil. It's not blatant like in other places where they lynch people, blah blah blah. But that's not necessarily the case. And when I started studying Brazil just year after year, I came to my own. I'm like, what's subtle about racism in Brazil? If you analyze the headlines and look at the stories, there's no way you can come to the idea that only subtle racism exists in Brazil, because subtle racism exists everywhere, even in the US, right? But it's not just subtle racism. It's blatant acts of racism that subtle would not be the word to describe it. This is what Sergio Graças, he also came to the same conclusion. Now, this is a guy who has an IG channel. He talks a lot about Black issues, Black history. He speaks about racism. And he came to the same conclusion that I came to a long time ago. Many Brazilians, even Black Brazilians, would say, oh, well, our racism isn't as bad as the United States. If you look at enough of the stories on the blog, blackbraziltoday.com, you really have to ask yourself, is it just true? Is it true that only subtle racism happens in Brazil? Because there's too many cases that says otherwise. This is what Sergio Graças had to say. That was our brother, Abdias do Nascimento, politician, writer, Brazilian, Black, who fought for civil rights and against racism in our society. He talks here about a view that existed in the past and still exists, and that real racism happened in the United States or South Africa with systems like Jim Crow laws and apartheid. Here in Brazil, however, there has always been something that was said to be veiled. For me, it's not veiled at all. Because this reading of racism is done through numbers, through statistics, where we have a population of 56% that needs to be represented with the same proportionality in places of power, in high places and places of decision. If it's not, that's racism. Which is the system of blocking access and opportunities. In the past, we didn't have the opportunity or the voice to talk about these situations. Today, we have that opportunity, and we will never remain silent. So you heard what Sergio Graças had to say, okay? Now, I want to move into just 4 cases of racism. It makes you ask, like, I thought it was supposed to be subtle in Brazil. And these are just a couple of the thousands of incidents that you can find. If you speak Portuguese or you can read Portuguese, you can find it just searching these incidents online in Portuguese. If not, I have, like I said, thousands of articles on the blackbraziltoday.com blog. So let's just check out a couple of them. This is a story from, I think this was earlier this year. Filthy Black. White woman offends and spits in the face of a Black man. This is by Pedro Borges. In August of 2023, Marcos Paulo Franco, a Black man and a student of a mechanical maintenance course for young people, was the target of racist offenses. Samira Victoria Serafim, a white woman who participated in the same training group at a Sinai unit in São Manuel in the state of Sao Paulo, spit in his face. The two were employees of a sugarcane production company which carries the same name as the city. The case happened on June 2nd after a disagreement between the two students in the classroom. The course teacher was absent from the classroom for a few minutes to go to the bathroom when Samita started to offend Marcos with the words, "You victimize yourself for being Black. You're Black. That's why you're in ish." Filthy Black, she called him. Then she got up. They're separated by computers. She just got up and spit in his face. Nothing subtle about that, right? Then you have another story. This happened, I think, maybe back in April. Former volleyball player beats Black delivery man with a dog collar in Rio de Janeiro. This is from Cecilia Solter. Former volleyball player Sandra Matias Correa de Sá is being accused of racial injury and aggression after attacking a group of app delivery people on Sunday, April 9th, 2023 in São Conrado, an upper crust neighborhood in the south zone of Rio de Janeiro. In a video that went viral on social networks, Sandra was shown assaulting Max Angelo dos Santos. The worker was with other delivery people on a staircase on the sidewalk of one of São Conrado's streets when, according to him, the woman came up to him, spat on the ground, and continued walking. The volleyball player then returned and started a commotion with the other girl. He reported to Jornal Nacional, the news program on Global TV in Brazil. So this is the woman and this is the guy who was assaulted. Mox also said that while Sandra assaulted one of the delivery women, she said that they were not in the favela slum. She says, "You're not in the favela, you're here. I'm the one who pays the IPTU here, boy." IBTU are property taxes. The delivery woman on the receiving end of the attack said that the woman called her trash and a favelada, meaning a person from the favela slum. She called me garbage, favelada, a lot of things, bad name, and calling for a fight. And I didn't want to fight. I said, "I don't want to fight. I'm going to run." "Yes, because I don't want to fight," said the female delivery person. So this is Max showing the marks that this woman left on his back after she, whipped him with a dog leash. Sandra then stepped to Max hitting him with punches and kicks. She then picked up a dog's collar and started to whip him. Speaking on her actions, Mox said she treated me like I was a slave, but she's forgetting that slavery ended many years ago and that can't happen. It's unacceptable. We can't accept a situation like this, said the delivery man. I've said this before. In some ways, you still feel like it seems like Brazilian society still looks at Black people as if they were enslaved, right? You see a lot of examples of this. Mox lives in Rocinha, which is one of the biggest favelas in Rio de Janeiro, and has been working informally for a year and a half since he lost his former job. Okay, that's the next case. Man who assaulted Black musician with a baton goes to jury in Curitiba, which is in what is Curitiba? I think is in Paraná, in southern Brazil. So this story is by Mateus Ramos. Look at the picture right here. This guy picks up a baton and starts beating on a musician, a homeless musician, a Black man. In November 2022, Paulo Cesar Bezerra, aggressor of the musician Ogivaldo Carlos da Silva, better known as Neno, goes to the popular jury for attempted triple qualified murder and racial injury. The decision was given on Friday, February 15th, a little bit more than maybe 11 days ago, 12 days ago, by Judge Leonardo Bichara Stancioli. The case happened in 2022 and was registered in downtown Curitiba. This is the man who was assaulted. In November of 2022, Paulo Cesar assaulted the musician Algibaldo Carlos da Silva, better known as Neno. The assaults were filmed by security cameras and show the man assaulting Neno with a baton. The court considered three qualifiers in the crime: a vile motive, a cruel means, and an appeal that made it impossible for the victim to defend himself. In the decision, the judge denied the request for freedom for the aggressor, who has been in prison since the day of the crime. Now, this is what trips me out right here. Look at this guy. He obviously made a racial slur like "you Black," but I'm like, look at this guy. Is it just me? Because this guy doesn't look anywhere near white to me, but yet he's attacking another guy because he's homeless and he's Black. We've seen situations like this in several different, I've covered this in other articles where it's like the so-called pardos or the persons of mixed race, they'll often take on some of the same ideological beliefs about Black people and commit racist acts against, clearly Black people, even themselves being mixed to some degree. I wouldn't have guessed that this guy considered himself white, and I don't know that he does or he doesn't. I'm just saying he attacked a homeless man for being Black and homeless. But yet, isn't this an action of somebody you would consider to be racist and most likely with white skin? It blows me away sometimes when you see people who look like him take out animosity against, more visibly Black people. Anyway, let's keep the story moving. I just wanted to point that out. This is what I was saying earlier in the video when I said the difference between what's pardo or brown mixed versus branco, which is white. I don't know if this guy considers himself white, but he's clearly not white, but he took this racist action. The defendant manifested racial intolerance and prejudice and acted due to the condition of economic vulnerability and racial prejudice in relation to the victim, as well as manifesting intolerance to a homeless person, read the sentence. The prosecution points out that the defender uttered offensive words against Neno's race and color. The complaint indicates that the man said, "Hey, negro, monkey, a homeless person has to die." In addition, Bezerra incited his own dog to attack the victim. Again, I'm looking at this guy like, really? Let's move on to the next case. Journalist is a victim of racism and assaulted in a supermarket in Nova Iguaçu. This story is courtesy of the Tupi, we'll say newsroom. A confusion over a place in line at a supermarket in Nova Iguaçu in the Baixada Fluminense area of Rio turned into a case of racism and bodily injury, which ended up at a police station. In a conversation with the report of the Super Rádio Tupi, journalist Daniel Nascimento claims that he was assaulted and cursed by a mother and a daughter. The situation happened on a Friday night, February 16th. He recorded a video showing one of the aggressors, identified as Leticia Caram de Assis, committing racial abuse. This is the victim and the aggressor. According to Daniel, the confusion started because of a place in the store's checkout line. The mother, identified as Rosemary Caram or Rosemary, which you might say in Portuguese, who appears with blonde hair in the video. She left the line and tried to return and bumped into him. The journalist then countered that she needed to decide where she would go since her daughter was holding a place in another checkout line. She looked at me and said she'd go wherever she wanted. She also said that she was a criminal lawyer and that nothing was going to happen to her. Then her daughter started cursing at me. She said I was a starving, poor, ugly little neguinho. Again, neguinho, literally it means little black guy, but in some ways it's kind of depending on how it's used. I've talked about this before. Neguinho can be something similar to the N word depending on how it's used. Now, what I want to point out here is what she said. She says, basically she says, I'm a lawyer, I'm a criminal lawyer, and nothing is gonna happen to me because of, whatever she did to the guy, she felt like she's gonna get away with it, which is something I'm gonna point out in the other links to other stories that I say this seems to be an occurring thing, a reoccurring thing, where Brazilians who commit racism have this attitude like they're gonna just get away with it, and sometimes it seems like they do. So anyway, these are the stories that I wanted to talk about today. Curious to know what you thought about these stories. I mean, this is what comes out of Brazil. You can see stories like this come out of Brazil every single day. But at this point, I'm going to end the preview part of the video. I'm going to end that here. Feel free to comment on this video up until this point. Share it, like it, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell. But now I'm going to continue on to my reaction and my breakdown of these racist acts in Brazil and how, other videos and articles that I've done to put them in context. So for those of you who want to check out my breakdown, I'll see you on the other side. So anyway, I want to pick up with where I left off in the preview of this video. It was a shorter video. This is going to be the long form video. So as I was saying, 4 cases that show that there's nothing subtle about Brazilian acts of racism. So as to go through a little bit of that, to give it even more context, I'm going to go over some past articles so that you can understand why I say that. This is an article from 2016 where it says in Brazil, it's normal to be racist. It is abnormal to fight against it. Okay. When people get busted, it's always funny to me. Years ago, you would see Brazilians when they get caught doing something racist. This is the author of this article. This is Stephanie Ribeiro. Some of you may know her from an incident that happened earlier, maybe about a year ago with one of the passport bros, but that's not the topic of this video today. Point is, I used to see a lot of pictures in Brazil when people would get busted doing something racist and they would pull their coat over their head, a jacket over their head, or whatever, because they didn't want to see the cameras to catch what they look like after they were cold busted doing something racist. Nowadays, it just seems like they don't even care. Like, yeah, I'm racist, and what? In Brazil, years ago, it used to be, I'm not racist. Some of my best friends are black, or whatever they might say. And then they would hide their face because they would be embarrassed for being caught doing something racist. Nowadays, it seems like they really don't care. Here's an incident. I forget what year this is from. Black taxi driver. Woman was accused of racism. She said she didn't want to ride in a taxi cab with a black guy. Okay. She says, okay, where's the woman at? So this is from another story. This is a taxi cab driver. And I want to just zero in on what it is that this lady said. This is the woman being escorted to the police station. This is the taxi cab driver. She's being taken to the police station after the incident. And she says to the taxi cab driver, let me see. It says here, she thought she would say what she said and get away with it. She said that her father is a police chief and said, you don't know who you're talking to. All right. So this woman, she said she doesn't like blacks. Where does it say that in here? Let me see. She says, I don't like blacks. I'm racist. I'm really racist. And then she even spat on his foot. She gets escorted to the police station and she says, you don't know who you're talking to. Like, she felt clear that she wasn't going to suffer any consequences for what she did. She's just going to walk and, pay the fine, and she's going to walk free. And this is something that we see over and over again in Brazil, people coming that way. This is another article from 2016. Next time, be white. Be born white. This lady, this white woman attacks this black woman on the beach and just starts insulting her. Next time, be born white. You have a complex of being born mulatta with hard hair. Woman is verbally assaulted on Rio Beach by a middle-aged white woman who she says she's a Hitler supporter. So can you imagine you sitting on the beach, all of a sudden a woman just comes to you and starts yelling at you, belittling you, making a scene, fussing and screaming. This actually made, I think this was on the Fantastical Sunday Evening News Journal in Brazil. It was just ridiculous. And then what did she say? Let me see if I can find what she said. Okay, listen to what she said. She says, the aggressor in the video actually told the young woman that she wasn't afraid of her going to the police and making a report, as one, she could afford to pay the fine, and two, nothing would happen to her anyway. So this is increasingly an attitude that a lot of racists in Brazil have. Go ahead, sue me, take me to the police. I'm gonna pay the fine and walk. I've seen it over and over again. It's like, again, the perfect crime. Here's another piece. People have lost the shame of being racist, says a black professor who was assaulted. He was insulted and stabbed by an unknown assailant. And this is what he was saying. He was like, at the time, the president of the country was Jair Bolsonaro, who's considered an extreme right-wing politician. They kind of compare him to, they make him like a Brazilian Donald Trump. And he was saying that in the age of Bolsonaro, it seems like, like the Brazil's racists have taken the gloves off. Like they don't care if they're labeled as racist or not. They're going to express how they feel, which is what I'm saying. This sentiment towards Black Brazilians has been going on for decades, if not centuries. I don't know how it is that Brazil went so long with people believing that racism didn't exist in the country. This is another incident, 2017. Go back to the slave quarters, you monkey, and straighten that hair. A Black woman was punched and dragged by her hair in a pub. Aggressor pays fine and walks. So this is what happened to this woman. She was assaulted, insulted. She was like punched in the face. He insulted her, told her to go straighten her hair. Go back to the slave quarters. In Portuguese, they say senzala. This is where the slaves slept, after, 16 to 20 to 22 hours of work. I mean, he physically assaulted her, paid a fine, and walked. So this is what I'm saying, the perfect crime in Brazil. And more people seem to have this attitude. What you going to do? You can sue me. I got money. I'll go and pay the fine and I'll walk. Here's another one, 2017. I have money, so I'll get away with it. 70-year-old lawyer pulls a Black woman's hair, slaps her, calls her monkey after paying bail, walks out of jail. So this is the guy right here. This is his victim. Can you imagine? They were on a bus and this guy just started, verbally assaulting this woman, pulls her hair. This happened in Belo Horizonte, which is the capital city of Minas Gerais. In Belo Horizonte, 70-year-old white lawyer verbally and physically assaults Black hairdresser on the bus, is released after paying bail. So we see this type of thing all the time. Where is the subtlety in racism in Brazil when you see these types of stories? Nothing subtle about it. Then we look. I always hear Brazilians will argue that Brazil isn't racist because we never had the KKK. But who needs the KKK when Brazilian police kill 5 times more than American police? On average, they kill 6 people per day. You go to areas in Rio and they have assault weapons like they're in the military, right? So what is my point? When we look at the statistics, these are just some images of what, some of the gear that police in Brazil will wear. Let's look at this next one. Now, in this particular story, this was another victim. A pregnant 24-year-old woman was gunned down. She got caught in the line of fire, 14 weeks pregnant, and she was shot down in a police action in Rio. But that's not what I want to focus on here. Let me just keep it moving. This is what I'm saying here. We never had a KKK in Brazil. People always justify that as Brazil being less racist, but then we look at what a lot of Black activists call a genocide against the Black population, specifically Black males. Brazil has death squads. These vigilante groups, often they go out with their, hoods over their faces, riding on motorcycles, and they just kill people. I'll give you a guess what color the people are that they usually kill. Okay. These are vigilante groups, and just kind of like the KKK, right? If you define Black in Brazil as Blacks and Browns, Brazil kills 17 times more people of African descent than in the US. How is the United States more racist when you see numbers like that? Let me see what else we have here. Official numbers show us that at the height of lynching in the U.S., 1882 to 1968, there were 4,743 lynchings in the U.S. Almost 1,300 of those victims were white, with more than 3,400 being Black. So in other words, 73% of the victims of these crimes were Black. In comparison, today in Brazil, about 77% of victims of police violence are non-white, meaning Black and brown. These figures were recently updated to almost 6,500 victims. Let's be real. In cities like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, it's like for years you could find police killed between 1,500 and 2,000 people per year in each of those states. What do you call it? You can't compare how many people they kill in Brazil versus what they kill in the United States, but yet they still want to say the United States is the more racist country. I beg to differ. Here's another example. This is a video that I put up some months ago. Man deletes his 7-month pregnant ex-girlfriend because he didn't want to have a Black baby. Okay. I thought race problems didn't exist in Brazil. If he had a Black baby, what would be the problem? But obviously there is a problem, and it's a problem that people still don't like to talk about. Even more blatant. Now, this video is a little bit grainy. Let me get into the article where I took from this for the video. Racism, 62-year-old man is killed by a neighbor who didn't accept Blacks. Okay. What it came down to is this guy, they didn't show the guy who killed this man, but the guy had been having words with him for several months at a bar. So the 62-year-old Black man just got up and started walking home. And the surveillance camera actually caught it where the guy came up from behind him. And what happened? He stabbed him like 20 times. I mean, he told him, apparently there was something going on between their families. And he was like, I didn't want to have a Black grandson. It's in here. This is actually the video. The inquiry concludes that the elderly man was killed in Belo Horizonte because of racism. I'm going to see if I can see anything else in here. Let me search for this real quick. Right. So it says civil police discovered that the suspect divulged hatred against Blacks and didn't accept his own grandson because of his skin color. So there you have it. My question would always be, what is subtle about racism in Brazil? In fact, as I was putting this story together today, I actually came across another shocking story that made the headlines, but I had already recorded this video. And I said, well, I'm going to have to cover that video next time because I had already finished the material for this one. I was going to go ahead and post this, but I have to cover another story that just recently came up. But I'm curious what you all think. Do these incidents of racism, and believe me, there's thousands more we could talk about. Does this strike you as subtle racism? Does this strike you as a country that has no racial problems, that is a racial democracy that sees everybody as all equal? Or does this strike you as a country that has serious racial issues? And now people are feeling more, how can we say, just at will to be able to express what they feel, to assault Black people, insult Black people, kill Black people, whatever it is. So I'm just curious. Let's start a conversation here. This could go on and on. Again, as I have almost 3,800 articles on the blog, check out some of the other stories that I posted there since 2011. But for now, I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to ask you to like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, click on the notification bell so you get the next video that I put up. And with that said, looking forward to hearing what you all say. I'm going to end the video here and ask that you all come back and check out the next video that I post.